Her hands trembled as she pressed send. A desperate message shot into the digital void, begging for help. She never imagined it would land in the wrong inbox, and she could never have guessed who would soon be standing at her door, holding her shattered world in his hands. The knock was sharp, echoing through the quiet house like a drumbeat of fate. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. For weeks, her life had felt like it was crumbling. Bills stacked higher than her courage, groceries thinning out, her daughter's shoes worn to threads. When she sent that message, she hadn't meant for anyone beyond her sister to see it. The words had spilled from her like a storm. I can't keep going. I don't know how I'll make it another week. She never expected an answer, but now someone was at the door. The single mother's name was Claire, a woman who carried the tired grace of those who give more than they have. Her eyes, once bright with youthful hope, were dulled by sleepless nights. She had fought battles no one had seen, nights at the hospital with her sick daughter, mornings racing to a job that barely covered rent, afternoons tutoring neighborhood kids just to add a few dollars more. The scent of stale coffee clung to her shirt, the ink of overdue notices smudged on her hands. Life had been heavy for too long. She opened the door, and there he stood. A man in a dark coat, not a debt collector, not a neighbor, but someone she had never expected. Daniel, a millionaire who had built his fortune in silence and humility. He was not the kind of man who flaunted wealth, not the kind who wanted headlines. He had once been a soldier, a leader who had buried friends overseas and returned to a world that felt too quiet, too ungrateful. His heart carried scars invisible to the world, but sharper than any blade. He had seen desperation before, in war zones and refugee camps, in the eyes of comrades whispering their last words. And now, somehow, fate had brought him to this doorstep. Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to shut the door, to hide her shame, but Daniel's eyes held no judgment, only recognition, only the quiet strength of someone who understood suffering without needing it explained. For a moment, the world stood still. Her story had begun long before that night. Years earlier, she had been married, full of dreams of building a life, raising her little girl with laughter in every room. But her husband's sudden passing had left her with a child in her arms and no roadmap for survival. She worked 2 jobs, then 3, her hands blistered, her back aching. Still, there were nights she went hungry so her daughter wouldn't. Neighbors saw her smile, but never the tears that stained her pillow. She was the invisible backbone of her little family, silent, steadfast, and unseen. Daniel, too, carried his history in silence. As a soldier, he had learned that dignity did not need words. He remembered the faces of men who never made it home, the weight of folded flags handed to mothers whose hands shook like Claire's did now. When he returned, he swore never to turn away from unseen battles. Wealth had come to him through determination and grit, but he never forgot the value of one simple act of compassion. The message she had sent had landed in his inbox by accident, yet to him it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a call, and tonight he had answered. But when he stepped into her dimly lit living room, he saw the injustice laid bare. A table with little more than bread and tea, a child's backpack patched in more places than whole. Silence filled the air. The kind of silence that screamed louder than words. Claire tried to apologize, tried to explain it was all a mistake, but Daniel lifted his hand gently. "You don't need to explain," he said. His voice was calm, steady, carrying the kind of weight only earned by a man who had stood at gravesides and not flinched. Claire's daughter peeked from the hallway, clutching a worn teddy bear. Her eyes were wide, cautious, yet curious. Daniel bent down, not with the arrogance of wealth, but with the quiet respect of a man who knew children deserved gentleness. He smiled, and for the first time in months, the little girl smiled back. The tension in the room thickened when Claire's landlord appeared at the door later that evening, his voice sharp, his tone cruel. He had seen her struggle and chose not to help, but to threaten. "Rent's late again? You got a week or you're out." His words cut like a knife, his presence a reminder of the world's indifference. Neighbors passed by outside glancing but saying nothing. Silence was their shield. No one spoke for her. Daniel remained still, watching. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood, tall and unshaken, his gaze never wavering. The landlord faltered under that silence, as if confronted not by one man, but by the weight of 1,000 unseen battles behind his eyes. Daniel finally spoke, his words measured and sharp. Respect is the rent we pay for our humanity, and tonight you're bankrupt. The landlord shifted, muttered, and left, the echo of Daniel's words clinging to the air. Claire stood frozen, the power shift so sudden, so absolute that she could barely breathe. Over the weeks that followed, Daniel did not simply hand her money and walk away. He became a quiet presence, guiding without pride, helping without noise. He paid the rent, yes, but he also helped her find stability, teaching her how to build a foundation that no storm could shake. He connected her with people who could open doors she never knew existed. Each act of kindness was done not for gratitude, but for honor. Claire often tried to thank him, but Daniel would only shake his head. "I'm not saving you," he said once. "I'm standing beside you. You are already strong enough." Those words became her anchor, and soon the community that had once stayed silent began to take notice. Neighbors who had walked past now offered help. Children who had laughed at her daughter's worn shoes now carried extra notebooks to share. The ripple of one man's silent honor spread wider than anyone imagined. Months later, as Claire walked her daughter to school, she looked up to see a crowd gathered at her doorstep. They weren't there to gossip nor to judge, but to stand in quiet respect. Daniel stood at the center, his coat draped across his arm, his expression as calm as ever. The silence was powerful, not empty, but full. It was the silence of solidarity, of a community awakened. Claire's eyes filled with tears, not of shame, but of relief, of gratitude. Her daughter squeezed her hand and whispered, "Mom, we're not alone anymore." And she wasn't. The story of a desperate message sent to the wrong man had become something larger, a reminder that sometimes fate doesn't make mistakes. Sometimes it delivers the right person exactly when they are needed. Claire would never forget the night a millionaire knocked on her door, not with judgment, but with silent dignity. And the world would remember the words Daniel left behind. The greatest strength is not in wealth, but in standing silently beside those who think they are forgotten.